Hi, my name is Dennis Kuhn. I'm owner of Pigeon Supplies Plus, and I want to thank everybody for coming today. For the first time, we're honored to have Dr. Botha here from South Africa. He's world-renowned pigeon veterinarian. He created MedPet and AVIO Med and Avian Biotech. Years of experience. Anything you want to know about pigeons, he is the person to talk to. I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Botha.
Thanks so much, Dennis. Yes, thank you. Well, it really is an absolute pleasure to be here tonight, you guys. We haven't got a packed room, but it was a short notice, and for everybody that's taken the trouble to actually arrive and be here, I'm truly honored and truly thankful, Dennis, for your invitation as well and the support that you've given us. So yes, Dennis from Pigeon Supply Company contacted me and he said, would we be prepared to look at looking and developing for him a specialist range of pigeon products within his company, and that is how Avian Biotech was born, and we believe he's got some really nice and cutting edge products. So tonight we're going to do a little bit of a formal lecture, and then integrated into that we'll do the questions, and afterwards we'll do extra questions if they come up on the podcast or from the audience, of course. You're very welcome to stop me during the lecture and just ask a question or disagree with me. I often say, and I'm on a really big WhatsApp group in South Africa. We're about 1,200 people on the WhatsApp group just on the racing pigeon side, and another 1,000 people on the fancy pigeon side. And I often say that I've learned more from Pigeon Fancier than I've ever done from my professors or all the publications in the world, because, you know, without practical experience, it's all just mumbo jumbo, and it's very easy to publish something in a journal or something and say that this is what the research shows. But if practically it doesn't work, then it just isn't fact. So for me, fact is actually separated from fiction the day that you give a pigeon some type of medication or some type of nutraceutical or vitamin, and it actually works. So thank you very much for everything that the Pigeon Fancy has done for me as well, and I could certainly not have been here without you guys. Very briefly, my background: I raised pigeons with my father. I actually started breeding fancy pigeons when I was about 10 years old with my father. He was a chemist, and he was my inspiration in really getting me into the science of veterinary treatment of pigeons. While I was at Onderstepoort as a student, I did a dissertation on pigeon diseases and medication, and I was also asked by Pigeon's hair products. And from there, MedPet was founded for about 20 years, exited the company, and we started AVIO Med a few years later. So I've been involved in this my whole life, and it is a true passion of mine, and I truly cannot live without pigeons, and I cannot live without pigeon fanciers. Although they are strange, let's be quite honest, we are a strange breed of people, but I think I fit in well, and it's, as I say, it's due to you guys that I'm still here and still around and doing this, so thank you very much. And also to our podcast man, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. I think this is going to make it possible for us to have this out so much wider than it would have been had you not been here. So Tony, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, so I called the lecture Pigeon Diseases Scientific Treatment Makes more sense. And as I explained to you, to me the science is one part of it, the practicality and the practical implication is the other part of it. I pride myself in saying that I have never formulated or developed a pigeon product or medicine that has not been based in science. To me, that's hugely important, and that means that essentially you want to know that the product, what you put into that product, has been backed up by some sort of scientific evidence or some sort of publication, and then there's real science behind it. But it's also hugely to understand that I'm one of the few people, I think specifically veterinarians, that actually adheres to the adage of combining science and nature. So part of my regime and part of my approach to science and to health of pigeons is actually to combine true mainstream medications, antibiotics, antiprotozoals, the medicines, with the natural medicines that we can find from nature. So that's the name nutraceuticals, that's actually nature's medicines. And I'm very fond of actually combining the two, because when a pigeon or an animal or a person is acutely ill, you can very seldom cure it by using the natural products alone. So you cure it first with mainstream medication, and then you keep the health, or you boost the body's immune system to help that medicine to get over the disease. So we really go with that adage of science and nature. We have thanked Dennis, and we're going to be in future doing the AVIO biotech products in these very nice sachets. I think the look and feel of it is really good, and as you'll see, there's some really nice products within his range. So I just want to quickly start off with what I call shotgun therapy, and please don't misunderstand me if I say this. I'm not saying it in a degrading fashion or degrading way, but sometimes we don't know what the disease is. My pigeon does this and this, what is wrong with it? In most cases, we're guessing. I mean, we need to actually see that pigeon, hold the pigeon, examine the pigeon, but more importantly, many pigeon diseases actually look the same. So we need to do very specialized laboratory tests before we really know. So when we have a pigeon that's acutely ill and we don't know what the disease is, we unfortunately have to go with shotgun therapy. We have to go with what we think it could be, one of these 2 or 3 diseases. Welcome, sir. Come right in. And that's what I call the shotgun therapy. And basically, we have a 3-in-1, 4-in-1, or all-in-1, or 5-in-1. And these are very popular in America. It's not as popular in other parts of the world. But I think in America, we've already, over the years, seen that if we use these products, and there's nothing wrong with the products, but if we use them, it gives us a broader spectrum of treatment, and saving the life of that pigeon or the flock of pigeons is actually a greater chance with this. The disadvantage with this is that you often have 4 or 5 or 6 different medications in one, and basically these medications aren't always the newest and the most effective treatment. So you're getting a broad spectrum, but you're often not honing into that disease and getting the best possible treatment for that disease. So we should always try in our approach to use these in emergency settings, but when you're really going to be looking at preventing disease effectively, treating disease effectively, it is better to go for the species or for the disease-specific symptom or the disease-specific treatment that we want to do. In the AVIO biotech range, we decided to launch a 4-in-1 powder, and tablets will be coming. So that's basically crop canker, E. coli, paratyphoid, and coccidiosis. Some of the major diseases that are there that will actually kill the pigeon or make it acutely ill. But let's also then start looking at deworming. Let's look at the facts of deworming. And this incredible photograph was taken by a veterinary colleague from mine in Africa with these travels. So we're saying dewormers added to the drinking water is simple and easy to use, true or false, and absolutely that's true. And it really is a case that in other parts of the world, and in South Africa specifically, I think people are as fancy as more inclined to treat food treatment than water treatment, and not to the exclusion one of the other. But they certainly come right in, sir. Welcome. So the food administration is not that common in America, but I'd like you to open your minds and perhaps just think that in many cases it actually may be beneficial, because birds will often still take some food, and they, in many cases, if you adhere the product to the food, you get a better effect. So yes, it's easy. You basically put it in the water and off you go, and you can see whether the birds actually drank it. But if you take the other side of the coin, dewormers added to drinking water is always effective. And if you say, is that true or false, that's emphatically false. There's absolutely no way that every dewormer that you're going to be using, and specifically in the water, is going to be effective. This is a case in point. This was a bird that was medicated with a water-soluble dewormer, and I'll tell you now why it failed so miserably, and that was the ascarids, and still a lot of tapeworm also came out. So the reason why that is the case is that the dewormers in water, drinking water, is not always effective. And the reason for that is we specifically have the problem that many of the good deworming products are not water soluble. So they can go into suspension into the water, and you put them into the water, and for the first 10 or 15 minutes, they are good because they're actually dispersed in the water, but then they settle down to the bottom. So your first few pigeons that drink, they're getting the right dose, they're basically getting the medication, but the others are basically not getting it because it's just settled down to the bottom. And Praziquantel is one of the very, very specific ones that we know about. That's the best tapeworm remedy. It's the most effective tapeworm remedy, but it really isn't that water soluble. So in cases where you use Praziquantel, it's better to actually use it in a very specific way. So basically, we want to say, please think about putting some of these deworming products over the food, which is very specific in the biotech range, is that we've developed it in such a way that you don't have to put oil or vitamin B12 or anything over the food and then sprinkle it over the food. This has really neat new technology, and it works in such a way that if you basically mix the powder with water, it becomes a gel. It almost looks like baby porridge. And you then adhere, put that over the food and mix the food a little bit, leave it 20 minutes to stand, and then it completely binds that product to the food. You can't even see it. So the pigeons don't taste it, they don't know it's there, but you're getting the right amount that's actually going over the food. So the food adherent technology that we've got in many of our food-based products make a very, very big difference. When you do it in the normal way, when you go to the feeding bowl and feeding trough, 40% of the product is actually lying at the bottom and it's fallen off the food. This doesn't work in that way. This is really good for tapeworm, roundworm, and hairworm. And I haven't got the time to go through each and every one of the worms, but we just want to give the concept of the water and the food type of product. Okay. Now this one, the ultimate dewormer from biotech, is basically a very unique patented technology that I developed. You mix it with a little bit of water and it actually bubbles and it effervesces. And that bubbling and the effervescence of the initial stock portion that you're making actually brings that whole product into the suspension in such a way that if you then add that stock amount to the drinking water, it stays in solution for a period of up to 12 hours. Okay, so this is a truly, truly unique. There's nothing like that in pigeon medicine at the moment, and that gave us the opportunity to actually use Praziquantel and levamisole as a broad spectrum dewormer, a really neat combination where the tapeworm portion is Praziquantel is actually then also water soluble. It becomes water soluble. The ultimate wormer has the same type of active ingredients. The only thing I want to warn about is that you want to be looking, if you look there, you'll see it contains oxfendazole. It may be a little bit small, but that I want to warn you guys about. Anything in the deworming product that's the active ingredient that ends on dizole. So it's fenbendazole, oxfenbendazole, benzimidazole. So it's all the zole, and the product ends in zole. They're the same group of dewormers, and they actually originally have been developed for cattle and sheep. So they're the ones that will burn feathers very badly. So if you have babies in the nest or you have birds in the molt, you want to stay away from any dewormer that has the adage zole at the end. Okay, that's real important. You'll see if you give it to the breeding birds and they take in that product and they feed that to the babies, you'll get these stunted feathers. In many cases, it's just a burnt feather, but I actually, at Honest to Port, when I did that dissertation, we showed how acutely effective it was in causing stunting of the growth of the feathers. So any of the Zole type products are good dewormers if combined, but you don't want to use them in the molt or during the breeding season. We're going to talk briefly about crop canker, trichomonas. And I'm just literally rushing through a few of the most important type diseases just to whet your appetite. Okay, we're going to be doing more of the podcasts. We're going to be doing more of the webinar type communications where I'll focus on one disease at a time. But now we're just sort of rushing through the whole thing. So the question is, I've treated all my pigeons against canker and new cases are appearing. Why would that be? Now, what do you guys see there? Do you think that's crop canker? Do you think that's trichomonas? What are your thoughts? So that's definitely not trichomonas. That's actually diphtheric pox. That's actually wet pox. Do you see the pox on the eye there? So the photograph might not be that clear, but this pigeon had pigeon pox, and it's a wet strain of it. If you see a lesion on the tongue itself, and there's a caseous lesion on the tongue, the chances are almost 100% that it's pigeon pox. box and it's not trichomonas. So you can treat with any trichomonas product, canker product, for 2-3 weeks. This will be there. New cases will come out because the pigeons actually get the cases via the mosquitoes, and then it spreads when they pick one another. It spreads, and if it's the wet form of the pox, that specific variant of the pox, it actually causes the wet pox. Okay, but there's other reasons as well. So basically, this is the other question. I've treated my pigeons with 3 canker products, but they are still positive on crop smear, so they seem not to be responding. What is the reason for that? And there are 3 main reasons for that. There's definitively resistant strains that's starting to develop. Even when I just qualified, we saw it in my practice, that you would treat with a really good canker medication and you would test it 2 days later and the organism would still be there. Maybe much lower and actually been suppressed, but hadn't actually been cleared up. So that resistant strains is something, and it's getting more and more and more. And we have to understand that all the canker medications, be it ronidazole, dimetrodazole, metronidazole, secnidazole, they're all the same group. It's just one is slightly better and newer than the others and a little bit more effective. But there's nothing completely new for the treatment of trichomonas in the medicine field. The other thing is poor quality product. Ronidazole is actually made only by one company in the world. The other companies that make ronidazole, with all absolute respect, if you analyze that product, is inferior ronidazole. So it doesn't always mean if you're buying a ronidazole containing product that it's made with a high quality ronidazole. If your raw material is not good enough, that product will fail, and that holds for any pigeon medication. Okay, so you've got to look at your reputable companies that's been around for years and years and years, and that has science behind the product itself. So it can be resistant strains, poor quality, and then very, very importantly is the reduced immunity caused by circovirus, the young bird disease. Remember that circovirus, which is the AIDS of pigeons, has actually turned into a virus which is no longer, just like AIDS, the whole progression is slowed down, and now it actually causes subclinical immune deficiency. So those pigeons are just not doing well. They can't fight the disease. And specifically in canker medications, there's nothing that will completely kill the organism if the body doesn't do its part. The body's got to take the last few organisms and actually take care of it and kill it through the immune system. So if you're repeatedly treating and it's not getting better, just think that it could very possibly be young bird disease that's coming up. If we look under the microscope, if you look at the right-hand side, that's a line drawing, and normally your nice round trichomonas organisms, you can see them clearly under the microscope. If they're nice and round, they're not that resistant. These slender trichomonas, when they actually look like little slugs, they're the ones that are the resistant ones. So you can, your veterinarian, if a vet does the test, he can get an idea. It's not set in stone, but definitely I saw in my practice when I developed Ronsec with the secnidazole, we had one group of pigeons from one little town in South Africa that we treated at 8 times the dosage with many, and they were all these resistant strains with the long shapes. Okay, so you can actually see it. It's not a definitive, but you can get some sort of an idea about it. Okay, so what are the best products for the hyper-resistant strains of trichomonas? So these strains that tend to not want to respond on the normal older type of product. And emphatically, that product is basically the secnidazole. So if you combine ronidazole, which is the one that we all know, the most pigeon medications, especially in America, contains ronidazole or dimetrodazole or metronidazole, but the ronidazole is the most common one. If you combine that with that product called secnidazole, now the secnidazole is actually a product that was originally developed for human trichomoniasis in females, so it's basically been specifically developed for the resistant strains of trichomonas. The beauty with secnidazole also is that it's a longer acting, so it stays in the bloodstream for quite a longer period of time. So So the ronidazole will kill them quickly and suppress them quickly, and the secnidazole will take care of those resistant strains and actually take the program forward and make sure that after 3-4 days it still has the effect on the. So that combination of ronidazole and secnidazole is the product that you want to be looking for, and that is what is in our ultimate canker remedy that we've developed for AVIO Biotech. A truly, truly unique product, water-soluble product. The tablet form will be coming in the next few weeks as well, and that's Ronsec, the slow-release combination of ronidazole, secnidazole that I developed for MedPet. Okay, so always look, if you see cankers not responding, look if you can find a product that's got that secnidazole in it. So ultimate canker remedy is the same as the other canker medicines. True or false? Emphatically, it's false, because we say you do have the addition of secnidazole, and that's unique in the sense that there's less resistance, it's more potent, it really does the job better. It's synergistic, basically the one strengthens the other one, the secnidazole and ronidazole, the one strengthens the other one, so you get hitting it with a double barrel shotgun, and it's basically safe. It's a really safe trichomonoside. It's not like Emtrol, which will often cause the nervous symptoms. Okay, so the AVIO Biotech Ultimate Canker Remedy is something unique for you guys to remember about. So now I'm going to quickly show you a series of slides and ask if you know this disease. So that starts there, and it's trying to fly, and it's flying down, and it's flopping, and the moment it flops down, it lies like that, okay? And then we're going to quickly have a look at what it looks like on the video. I hope you can actually see it. Okay. Anybody, in the end, that it looks like a Boeing coming down to land. Okay, so they pull themselves forward with the wings, and the feet actually become almost completely paralyzed. You guys know this disease? Have you seen it in your pigeons at all? Very, very common disease in South Africa. I think in the warmer areas as well. It's called muscle and wing disease. It's caused by a bacteria called Streptococcus bovis. And it specifically causes this disease in pigeons. Streptococcus bovis is a bacteria that is generally found in the intestine of all pigeons, and under certain circumstances, when the resistance goes down or when you've been treating with the wrong antibiotics, in this specific case with something like Bactral, which it isn't susceptible to for a long period of time, that bacteria starts overgrowing. It also produces little spores, little cells, which lies around in the ground, and when there's a rainstorm and thunderstorms, you often get these spores to germinate, and they infect the pigeons again, and you get an over amount of that. It then goes into the intestine, and then goes into the bloodstream via the intestine by a poison that it secretes, and then from there it actually lodges in the muscles of the chest, so the pectoral muscles. And the pectoral muscles are the ones that actually cause the movement, and it also has an effect on the nerves of the legs itself. So muscle and wing disease, if you see that, then really think about that. But the second pigeon you saw, where she was just basically no loss of balance or anything, that pigeon you must think about calcium deficiency as well, especially in laying hens. Okay, so when you've got calcium deficiency, or when they don't have enough vitamin D that they can't absorb the calcium, you need to think about the possibility of calcium deficiency as well. And remember that calcium deficiency in pigeons are very, very much more prevalent than in any other species of animals, because we found by research very specifically that pigeons need the high quality calcium, not just calcium carbonate. They need 3 calcium salts to actually ensure your absorption of those calciums. Okay, so basically, what is the antibiotic of choice? Amoxicillin or penicillin is the antibiotic of choice. It is by far the Rolls-Royce treatment. Baytril and many of the others are not effective in the treatment. But having said that, you need high dose amoxicillin. So you can't go with a normal amoxicillin that's in normal pigeon medications. You need a very high dose because you need 200 milligrams per kilogram. That's a massive dose. Luckily, amoxicillin is so safe that you can actually do it at that very high dose. So really the amoxicillin is the one to go for. And that's the type of products, the amoxicillin tablets that Dennis has, the amoxicillin 20%. As you can see, this is a really high percentage amoxicillin. So if you use that, you're going to get that high level of amoxicillin you use. And then the Avian Biotech YBD remedy. That's a remedy we developed specifically for young bird disease in pigeons, but it contains, as part of the antibiotics, it contains that high level of amoxicillin as well. So an excellent product to use for the young bird disease as well. Please don't, if you have pigeons looking that way, enrofloxacin Baytril has a great place in treating certain diseases, but with this I can absolutely guarantee you, if your flock is suffering from this and you treat with enrofloxacin, it will get worse. Okay, you're killing the good bacteria, and the bad bacteria, those streptococcus, will just overgrow. So the enrofloxacin is not indicated at all in this. So high dose, 20% amoxicillin is what you basically need. Young bird disease, very, very briefly, as I said, it's a circovirus. It's a virus that reduces the immunity in pigeons, and you can basically prevent that to some degree by actually acidifying the intestinal tract or using high-quality prebiotic, probiotic, toxin-binding type of products, which we'll be developing for Avian Biotech as well. So that's a preventative type of product. There's no truly effective vaccine. There are vaccines from Europe, and they're doing their bit to a degree, but there's no really magical vaccine available at this moment in time. And unfortunately, I can't really talk about young bird as well. I want to spend a little bit more time on the paratyphoid. So I call it paratyphoid, salmonella, the lurking danger. Incidence is very, very high. Definitively in America, it's one of the diseases that we see a lot in the fancy pigeons, specifically Modinos, Kings, the bigger type of breeds. The organism is called Salmonella typhimurium, and it's that specific one, the variant Copenhagen. So it's a very, very specific salmonella that will cause paratyphoid in pigeons. Okay, it's resistant to the environmental factors, so this organism is very difficult to kill. And we'll talk just now about the rodents that actually carry it and what the importance of that is. And then very importantly, it's highly resistant to antibiotics as well. This specific salmonella is resistant, and you've got to use the right antibiotics to actually be able to kill it. So basically the course of the infection, very, very briefly again, birds do their poop on the lawn or wherever, or in the pigeon loft, and it lies around there, and they basically get a high load of bacteria in the food or where they're actually pecking around, and that actually causes the intestine to get developed, the disease to develop in the intestine, to develop diarrhea. It gets into the bloodstream, much like the muscle and wing disease, and basically from there it colonizes many organs. So that's what's so different from muscle and wing disease and paratyphoid. Muscle and wing will only colonize the pectoral muscles. Salmonella typhimurium will colonize the main issues, and they basically being, I'm going to skip this just for a moment, that's the intestine. It starts in the intestine, it goes to the organ form, and it basically often goes to the brain, to the joint, and then to the reproductive tract in the sense of the ovaries of the hen. It has never been finally proven to sit in the testes of the cock, but we know that it definitely sits in the ovaries of the hen. Okay. So I just want to spend time on this one. The other transmission is direct transmission by poop and by mating with one another, and actually all the rest that the pigeons in their general day-to-day living has. But this is your biggest problem. Your rodents are the biggest single problem in salmonella. Why? The rodent has an inherent resistance against salmonella and inherent resistance against that Copenhagen salmonella. So it actually carries that bug, the bacteria, in its kidneys, and when it urinates, it excretes high levels of that organism in the urine. And there's nothing that a rat loves more than to go and sit in the pigeon loft and eat the food of the pigeons, and then as it walks away to go and then to pee on the food. Okay, and that emphatically has then infected your food, and even microwaving of that food for a short period in many cases won't kill that organism. So it's very, very, very important to make sure that you don't have rodents which is transmitting that disease. Okay, if rodents are around, you can almost be sure the next year you're going to start having salmonella. Okay, so it's a very important thing of doing that. The symptoms, as I said, includes the reproductive form, so it lives in the ovaries, and it actually goes into the egg. So that egg is actually laid with that organism already in it. And then what can happen? The eggs are sometimes small, they're sometimes blood tinged because there's an infection in the oviduct or in the uterus, if you want to call it that, of the pigeon. So there's actually blood staining. And then very importantly, in some cases when the babies don't die in their eggs, they're actually born with this disease in their bloodstream. It normally sits in the spleen, and from there it then goes, and you can get death up to 2, 3, 4 weeks, or they can get over it but become carrier babies themselves or carrier pigeons themselves. So it's a very difficult disease to control, and you need to very specifically think of what you're going to do once this disease is in your pigeon loft. Okay, so infertility in cocks, doesn't it? As I say, never definitive publications on it, but I myself believe that it does actually cause infertility. And then chlamydia, mycoplasma, and E. coli are the 3 other diseases that will cause this infertility and death in these shells as well. Okay, so just very quickly to talk about that. So now we get to the treatment of salmonella, and I think the others has given you the background of how the disease works, but this is hugely, hugely important for you to understand how critically important it is to use the correct treatment for salmonella treatment. And those are the antibiotics on the left-hand side that has an effect against salmonella, okay? On the right-hand side, they are completely ineffective. So terramycin, doxycycline, penicillin, lincomycin, sulfas, erythromycin, you may as well forget using them whatsoever, okay? The quinolones basically are still effective, and they used to be highly effective. They were the absolute alpha and omega, the gold standard treatment of salmonella. It's no longer the case. Trimethoprim is fairly effective. Amoxicillin is far better, and we'll talk about that. And then furazolidone or pheraltidone and chloramphenicol are the ones that I personally prefer. So Baytril, the good, the bad, and the ugly on Baytril. Yes, is that better? Thanks so much. I think it's fine, but fantastic. So Baytril, as I say, had a very good place in treatment of salmonella for many, many years. The problem is that if you want to effectively kill the carrier state of salmonella in pigeons, you need to go to 2 to 3 milliliters per liter of water. That's 4 times the recommended dose. Normal dose is 1 milliliter per 2 liters. Now you need to go to 4 milliliters per liter, and you need to do it for 10 days. And emphatically, I can absolutely guarantee you, and there's publications proving that in chickens, that it will actually then cause a large percentage of maybe clearing the disease, but you're really stuffing up, excuse the word, your treatment, your breeding program going forward. Okay. It also in young birds, very young birds, 4 to 6 weeks, up to about 3 months of age, as they're growing, we know that it can cause damage in the cartilage of the joints, and pigeons need that cartilage. A pigeon, there's no way a racing pigeon, and even a bigger breed of your fancy pigeons can function effectively with damaged cartilage. So that's the negative part of the Baytril. And then, as I say, the scenario where the resistance against Baytril is getting more and more has emphatically been proven. So it still has its place, but it's not the alpha and omega. We just have to understand what the limitations of Baytril is. And coming back again, when you're not sure whether it's muscle and wing disease or whether it's salmonella, you're going to do much worse with Baytril than you could ever do with any of the other antibiotics. Okay, so Baytril is always effective against paratyphus. typhoid and all other bacteria, definitively that's false. That's not the case. Okay. So what do we say? What is my approach? My approach is that we basically need to look at polypharmacy. We basically need to look at a combination of antibiotics to treat this disease. So if you look at we call them the nitrofurantoins, furazolidone and furaltidone are the two. Furaltidone is the better one of the two. It's more water soluble. You need a slightly lower dose. And it's very, very good for the intestinal portion of the disease. It does not get absorbed by pigeons, so it cannot kill the bug, the salmonella, in the joints or in the liver or in the brain or anywhere. It kills only in the intestine. Very effective for actually eliminating the intestinal phase of the disease. So when you're giving furaltidone, you're doing very well in killing the intestinal part of it. The other antibiotic possibilities, trimethoprim, okay, but high degree of resistance. Amoxicillin, high dose treatment, you need the amoxicillin. And why do we want amoxicillin? Because it is still partially effective, but it has the big advantage of killing quickly. It's a bactericidal antibiotic, so it will basically kill that bug boom. And the ones that are then basically left, we then go with the chloramphenicol. So the chloramphenicol is a slower antibiotic, but the beauty of chloramphenicol is that it actually attains very high levels in the blood, in the organs, so it goes into the joints, it goes into the brain, which no other antibiotic does, and it also gets good levels in the ovary. So it's your best possible choice of actually getting rid of that organism. Okay. Dennis and them have got fluorphenicol, which is a derivative of chloramphenicol, which does the same type of work. So in this polybiotic, in taking the antibiotics together, and yesterday I found an article where they've actually proven conclusively, statistically now, that people, when they combine the correct antibiotics, more than two antibiotics, three antibiotics correctly, those antibiotics will be far more effective than one antibiotic alone at a lower dose. So that's exactly what we did in this case. We looked at the antibiotics and we combined furaltidone to kill in the intestine. We used amoxicillin to kill rapidly and in the other organs, and then chloramphenicol to do the extended treatment. Okay, and that product basically is the product that is synergism. The one is more effective than the one, and then they are on their own, and that's a typhoid remedy from AVIO Biotech. Okay, and that is there's a typhoid cure product from AVIOmed as well. But that is a unique combination. I don't know of anybody else in the pigeon medicine world that's actually done this. And this has been available in this format for the last 10 years. We've had very, very, very good success with it. So that's all the different choices that you've got. And now it says, I've treated my pigeons repeatedly with antibiotics and they still show sign of paratyphoid. Why? So wrong antibiotic, wrong dosage, too short a time. That's hugely important. You cannot clear up salmonella paratyphoid with a 3 or a 5 day treatment. You have to go with a 10-day treatment. They did not vaccinate correctly. We'll talk now again about that. And they did not control, or the rats weren't controlled. They were reinfected again by rats. Okay. So the booster in the preventative program, you want to use it 10 weeks before the racing or breeding season. But let me just step back a second and say this you will only do if you know you have salmonella, if you know you have paratyphoid, if you've been struggling with this disease and you can't clear it, if the disease is there. This is not something you're going to be doing preventatively like we do canker medication and worm medication and coccidia and that type of thing. It's a treatment and a preventative program for the guy that's struggling with salmonella in his loft. So 10 weeks before the breeding season, 10 days typhoid cure in the water, or otherwise the typhoid remedy in the water. We vaccinate with a reputable paratyphoid inactivated paratyphoid vaccine on the day 10, on the last day of your antibiotic. And the antibiotic doesn't interfere with the vaccine because it's a killed vaccination. And then very, very importantly, you have to, if you don't do that, you can just as well not spend the money in doing the top one. You have to do a booster vaccination 14 days later. Antibiotics of the inactivated bacterial strains will not work with a single vaccine. If you do it, they get immunity, and within 2, 3, 4 weeks, that immunity wanes and it goes away. If you give the booster, then the immunity is normally there for 8 months to a year. Okay, so you've got to do the booster. And then 10 days of a good prebiotic, probiotic. Control the rats and feed clean food. Make sure that you don't have contaminated food in there. Okay, right. So then we're going to very briefly talk about infertility, and I just wanted, somebody spoke to me here and said they're struggling a little bit with infertility or the vigor itself. So when I started MedPet, we developed a thing called cock fertility and hen fertility tablets, and at that stage there was the only science that was around was basically vitamin E and magnesium had been proven to stimulate the immunity. And then L-carnitine and creatine, which built the muscle and caused the vigor in the cocks. So the hen fertility and cock fertility contains high levels of vitamin E and one other active ingredient. That's the sort of price that you'll pay for the hen fertility. The avian biotech product called AVIO BioCock, basically complete formulation. The difference is that it contains many other factors. It's $3 per bottle more affordable, and it contains coenzyme Q10, which no other product in the world that I've seen specifically for infertility. And coenzyme Q10 actually stimulates the sperm formation and the maturity of the sperm. Okay, again, being emphatically proven by scientific trials being done in other species and in pigeons. Fertility in hens, the same sort of story. Basically, with this one, complete formulation, $3 per bottle cheaper, and astragalus herb we use in that one. That's a very specific herb that's been proven in hens and in sheep and in goats, chickens, to actually stimulate the fertility and the egg-laying capacity of those species then. Okay. Right, so we've run through everything that I want to sort of throw at you guys. We've got a bit more time now for questions. Maybe fancy a pint, Keith. I don't know if we want to have a pint, but let's go. Yes, sir.
So to refer to that last thing, well, like fertility with a cockbird.
Yeah.
I have a cockbird, right? This whole season, 3 clutched eggs, not fertile, right?
Yeah.
Could he go since, like, say he wasn't fertile this spring, I give him these pills? Is there a possibility that you become fertile again? Or?
Okay, so number one, when you've got an infertile cock, is he an older bird or young bird?
No, he's like a 2017.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so if they're very old, the percentage efficacy or the percentage of success is lower. Okay, if they're young birds and you do the fertility tablets, you get about 20% chance of them breeding again and filling the eggs. Okay, it's not a golden bullet that will do every single case, but you definitively have a much higher percentage success with the new formulations that you had in the old. And I'm very conservative in saying 20. I'd say it maybe even 30 or 40%. In those cases where it doesn't work, I've got a whole treatment program that we inject them with hormones. And it's a very specific hormone. It's not a testosterone, because you don't want to give a bird that's infertile testosterone, because that will stimulate the vigor and the libido of the bird, but it suppresses the formation of your sperm. So it works on the gland itself that excretes, that says excrete natural testosterone and excrete the whole hormonal balance. So we do that. We take the hen and cocks and we separate them, still keep the cock so that he can see the hen and that they can still peck over between the wires. First injection, a week later, put them together, second injection, and if they haven't actually laid eggs, a third one again. And with that, we're getting up to 40 to 60% efficacy. Okay, but that's a real special compounded hormone. Okay, I hope that does it answer the question.
Perfect.
Okay. So then I had a question. We already had the question here, and somebody posted. Yes, sorry.
So I do have a question. He wrote, you spoke earlier about adding medication to feed earlier.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on putting all medication on feed instead of water? And
Okay.
why?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. So definitely there are medications that can go into water very, very effectively. The main prerequisites are, number one, that they've got to be soluble. Okay. It's no good putting something in the water, and that's some of our vitamin mineral products are always put over the water, over the food, because they will sediment out. So water solubility is really important. The second thing is the quality of the water. If your water is highly chlorinated, you need to let that water stand for at least an hour or two and stir that water so that the chlorination and the disinfection will go out of it, okay? Because often the product that you're giving in the drinking water will be inactivated by the the third thing is, if you basically, does that product that you're giving it, the pigeon, cause aversion to drinking water? And that happens a lot of times as well. So if your water medication is not doing that, for instance, Spiromycin doxycycline is a beautiful case in point. It works perfectly well, but if it's heavily chlorinated, the water, the doxycycline will go black. Okay, so if you have a responsible manufacturer of medicines, they will tell you which is the best to use. And if it says water medication and they're responsible and they're scientific, they've done all the trials, they know that those pigeons will accept the thing. So it's not a yes or no answer. You've got to look at each product on its own. But it's really important that we open our minds to actually start using food medication as well. Okay. And the general principle is, if you're putting 1 milliliter per liter of water, you put in 1 milliliter per kilogram, or to 2 milliliters per kilogram, depending on what it is. Okay, but you can medicate water very successfully if the formulation is correct. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so what 4 or 5 medicines should any fancier have on hand? And this was really a difficult question to me, because, it absolutely all depends. And what I've based my answer on is basically primarily on the incidence of the disease and also the danger of the disease. So you want to have something in cases where you don't have 2 or 3 days to wait for that medication to arrive. So this is almost what you should have in your cupboard, because you're going to be using this more regularly. And there is one other product that I'm going to talk about, but I'll talk about that on its own after this. So I strongly believe, when we're looking at pigeons, you cannot stay away from regular and effective deworming. Okay, we breed pigeons; they all sit in one loft together. Every week or 2 week or week, they go onto the combine truck. They pick up worms and coccidia and things there. Trichomonas, the same thing. So basically, some diseases need to be treated regularly if you want to perform optimally. Yes, I totally agree with the adage that some pigeon strains are naturally and inherently more resistant against disease. And if you do have pigeons like that, you could get away possibly with just prevention in the sense of immune stimulants. But if you're truly going for performance, and you've bred for performance and you've left the immunity behind, then basically you need to treat. So basically I would have a good dewormer in there. I'd have a good coccidia product in there, and a good product for trichomonas, because those, to me, you need to treat regularly. If you're going to have a successful fancy pigeon breeding program or a racing pigeon breeding and racing program, those are almost non-negotiable. And remember, all 3 of those are not antibiotics. That's really, really important. People come to me and they say, you give us this product and it's just littered with antibiotics. You're throwing medicine at the pigeons the whole day, and there's not enough days in the week to give the medicines. That's not true. Those are they're not antibiotic. They basically I'll get to the word, but they differ from your straight antibiotics. Okay, so they made for parasites, and they made for treating those parasites per se. Paratyphoid and muscle and wing disease, and then Clostridium, which I haven't spoken about. Those are your emergency diseases, where if the pigeons get them, they're going to start dying. So you need something for paratyphoid that will also have an effect against muscle and wing disease, and also against the Clostridium and the muscle and wing disease. Okay, and then the young bird disease, and as I said, the muscle and wing. So I'd keep 4 or 5 products available, and this is what I would do. I would use worm out. I would basically use the standard dewormer. If you can buy Soluworm to alternate as well, if you do have the funds to do that, that'll be great. we basically want to use a coccidia product. The sulfacox has the advantage that it does kill E. coli as well. So if you choose only one, that's a good one to basically choose. You want to use the ultimate canker remedy because you want to treat them as effectively as possibly against canker so that you're not wasting money and time, etc. Typhoid remedy is the fourth one, and then the fifth one is YBD remedy, which will take care of muscle and wing and muscle and Clostridia in some way as well. It's not the very best, but it'll have an effect to stop those deaths. Okay, so those are the general ones that I would suggest. And then I would very strongly suggest that in your armament you have some sort of a product for chlamydia, basically ornithosis, and mycoplasmosis. Remember, and I'm not going to talk on respiratory disease. That's a whole lecture on its own. It's a hugely complex disease, the respiratory diseases. But the basic facts are that when birds get respiratory, they either get chlamydia or they get mycoplasma, or which very, very few vets are actually focusing on and very few people realize they get both together. So I coined the phrase orniplasmosis. So it's ornithosis and mycoplasmosis. That's when that pigeon actually has mycoplasma and chlamydia in one disease, okay? And I'm not going to discuss symptoms and so on. So Spirodox is definitively one of the AVIO products, the only one that actually contains the spiromycin and doxycycline at the right dose. So you're treating the mycoplasma with the spiromycin and you're treating the chlamydia with the doxycycline. And if it is then chlamydia, or if you're not sure, unfortunately, again, that's very much the same as the salmonella. You start off with this and you have to go on for another 14 days with a straight doxycycline alone, okay? Because chlamydia definitively, absolutely is not killed with a 7-day or a 10-day treatment. To effectively eradicate chlamydia in your pigeon loft, you have to go for 21 days. So you've done 7 days here and 14 days there. And then very nice, the Respicure tablets, which is a spiromycin doxycycline, you can use to singly treat your baby or your birds that are basically very ill and don't respond well, okay? So, or are not drinking enough water or not basically taking in enough food. So that's my treatment for that I would keep on hand. At the very least, this one, so that you can basically start treating the moment you get really serious swollen eyes, rails, coughing, difficulty in breathing. Okay. There's a product called Bromexine, which we always combine with your respiratory antibiotics. It's an absolute magical product. It basically loosens the phlegm in the respiratory tract and basically also stimulates the little hairs within the respiratory tract to actually excrete the bugs and bacteria and slime and everything. So the Bromexine combines very good with antibiotics. Yes, ma'am.
So if you go back to your list of the 4 or 5 medications, and obviously if you have the muscle and wing or paratyphoid, you're not racing at that time, you're going to be out anyway, but yeah. Which of those medications are safe to use as a preventative during the race season without giving up performance?
Emphatically, every single one of those would be safe. We've had pigeons race on typhoid cure, the equivalent of the typhoid treatment, and that they've had it up to the last day of basketing and won the combines. Many people in South Africa will use that for 3 days only in the mid-season to bump them back into the racing performance. It's not effective, and then it works primarily against the E. coli, because E. coli you can suppress and treat quite effectively with a 3 to 5 day treatment. But yes, that whole range should be fine. Okay. Good question. Right. So then, why do some pigeons' feathers get wet in the rain and others not? And Dennis asked me this question, and I was very brave, and I made a very big mistake, and I made it as though I knew everything. And I said, Dennis, I can tell you exactly why. And he said, okay, well, tell me. And I said, because the little gland that sits at the back of the pigeon's tail, called the uropigeal gland, and why I know so well about this gland is we call it the pupoliki in Afrikaans, which means little bum or little, I won't go into it, but in any case, so the pupoliki of a chicken, when they've started now in South Africa cutting the tail part, the tail itself, with that gland off and not serving the chicken with the pupoliki. And I have to pay everybody 20 rand at the restaurants to bring me the pupolikis. And I saw the pupolikis got this gland on. So I thought, well, the pigeon has that gland as well. And the whole idea with that pupoliki is that that gland excretes oil. And the birds preen themselves. And that oil doesn't actually only cause shine, it actually strengthens the barbules that actually keep the feathers together, that maintains the integrity of the feathers. But then lo and behold, when I went and did the research, because I didn't want to just come and tell you guys about it, pigeons don't have that gland on the pupoliki. Pigeons just don't have it. They actually have what we call powder down. And this is the first time I've learned this, so it just shows you how much I learned from pigeon fanciers. So this feather never molts. It can fall out and be pulled out, and when they fight, you'll find some of them lying around, but they don't molt this. This feather stays. And pigeons and penguins and a few other birds are the only birds that has this. They break off, and the white that you find when you hold a pigeon against your shirt or whatever, that down, that actually has the same function as that gland's oil. So that actually supplies the oil and the coating properties. So some birds have less of these down. Genetically, they have less of the down feathers, and they will then get wet more easily because that down covering of the feather as they preen actually stops the water from drowsing and actually wetting the feather itself. Okay, so genetics play a major role in that, certainly, but very importantly also emphatically proven that the correct supplement that pigeons can get will actually strengthen the down and will actually strengthen the whole feather development. So we need supplements and genetics to actually have that work ultimately. The Pre-Molt 100 was the first supplement that I developed for pigeons for specifically the molting period, and basically it's a really good formulation, but again, as time grew, there was a whole lot of new things that came out. So the AVIO malt within the AVIO Med range is actually an improvement, a dramatic improvement. If you take the two bottles and you put them next to one another, you'll see that even contains MSM. It contains a multitude of other newer nutraceutical products. So it's like chalk and cheese, the two. The one was a good old model. That is the AVIO malt is new technology, and that is what you should be using. And then you should be using a high quality oil as well, okay? And not just the linseed oil, but you need to look specifically when you're looking at oils at your omega-6 oils. And that is basically canola oil, that's wheat germ oil, that is basically linseed oil, okay? And those are all omega-6 oils. The wheat germ oil has a little bit of omega-3, but you want the omega-6 that strengthens the skin and basically the feather itself. So we will be developing a really good quality oil and a pre-malt equivalent for AVIO and Biotic as we go on. Okay, and then I was asked what's the country disease incidence, and this is just a guess. So USA paratyphoid, internal parasites, YBD. Definitely Australia, they had the first rotavirus infection, and that's top of the pops there. In Europe, respiratory is a big problem, and trichomonas. And in Morocco, where I was, we picked up the Pakistani strain of the pigeon paramyxovirus. And then in South Africa, the pigeon paramyxovirus, young bird disease, and we've just this year had our first case of rotavirus. And then in all countries, crop canker will have an incidence of between 37 and 40% of pigeons will actually have crop canker and carry it. Yeah, it's a pity that's there now. So I'm going to go past this. I think we've had enough time, but all I want to say is that in young bird disease, it very, very often is combined with the other diseases. Okay, so you can actually get young bird disease combined with herpes virus and circovirus, adenovirus, herpes virus, and now the added virus that we're starting to get when they get young bird disease is rotavirus in South Africa. I don't know whether it's been published here, but I don't know if it's going to be generally seen. The big thing with the rotavirus is that you basically get, this is a case in South Africa where we, under the electron microscope, had the rotavirus and circovirus together, and this is actually what they look like. It really, and I'm sorry for for showing you guys this, but it really is terrible. And they develop this acutely within 24 hours. They start with a luminescent green poop, and within 24 hours, this is what they'll look like. Okay, I do believe that in South Africa, the muscle and wing and rotavirus is getting together, coming together, and that's why you get this sort of paralysis syndrome that you actually get seeing there. Can you guys actually still see it in spite of that light? Okay. As you can see, it's really horrible. In the end, they actually drown in their own fluids, and the whole body just literally shuts down. Okay. Okay. This is the end stage, and you can literally, that poor pigeon is just sitting there, and it really, I've made this slide a little bit smaller now, so. But you can see it's really horrible disease, and we're seeing more and more. Have you guys seen anything like this in America? Nothing. And we'll definitely be looking at a supplement for avian biotech as well. Okay, so then I just want to say on the avian biotech range, we'll definitely be looking at range expansion, and wherever there's a shortfall of product, and I'm working closely with Dennis in seeing how we can improve the avian biotech and add to the biotech range as well. And please, if you could give feedback to him and say what type of diseases, we'll be in constant communication with him and trying to improve the range and actually getting new and more effective products on the market as well. Have we got any more questions there, Tony, from the field?
You actually covered it on the second time, so
okay. So far, so good. Perfect. From the floor, you guys, please, this is your chance. Yes, sir.
So let's say a hen is, trying to lay egg, calcium deficient.
Yeah.
I always get, broke up, like Rolaids, Tums, something like that. Is there anything else? I mean, it seemed to have worked, or maybe a lot of it.
Yeah. No, definitely. In the acute phase where they're basically becoming paralyzed, etc., the amount of calcium that they'll absorb via Tums, which is effectively calcium carbonate. So that's the same as what do you call it? Things that they write on the blackboard chart. There we go. Yeah. So that's the same. That's what calcium carbonate is. So birds absorb around about 5 to 10% of calcium carbonate. So if you give them a heavy dose of that, they'll still absorb enough to actually get over it. But it is really better to actually use a formulation. And in the Fertical from AVIO, we have 3 different calciums. It's a calcium ascorbate, lactate, and calcium carbonate. And it's definitely, you get much better absorption from those 3 and prevention of your whole calcium deficiency. Okay, and always remember there's a cofactor of vitamin D and magnesium in the absorption of calcium. So a good supplement for calcium will have vitamin D and magnesium, especially if those birds are stock birds that's housed outside of the sun, that they don't get at least 4 hours of sun per day.
So one of the questions that presented was, do you have like a program for all your medication?
Yeah.
So example, pre-breeding, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you treat them?
Yeah.
And the last but not least, what do you think about expiration dates? Do medications expire?
Yes. Okay, great. So let's answer the first one first. Yes. Within the AVIO range, we have 6 different programs. So to me, and this may be the single most important thing that I'm going to say today. And if you forget everything else, I'd love you to just remember this, that what you're breeding today is what is going to determine what your future is going to be next year. Okay. And we've seen that this year in South Africa very, very acutely, and for the last few years. In South Africa, we do have the Pakistani strain of the pigeon paramyxovirus, okay? And the vaccines that we have in South Africa, it's only the compounded vaccine that I developed then. So people vaccinate their pain, and the pigeon's immunity then is perfect, and they then get young bird disease, and their whole season is at a loss. Because we have to remember, now I'm not going to spend a lot of time on paramyxo, but we have to remember that a pigeon that is infected with paramyxovirus as a young pigeon will develop irreparable permanent kidney damage and to some degree brain damage. Those are the two target organs that the paramyxovirus will target. So that pigeon ostentatiously looks as though it's perfect, and it flies very well around the loft, and it flies very well up to 100 kilometers. But from 100 kilometers, and that's an empiric distance I'm quoting, but sometime during the race, the kidneys can't cope. It just can't concentrate the urine enough, and that pigeons dehydrate on the road, and they get lost or they constantly late, and then pigeon fanciers start grabbing at every conceivable medicine and try and fix the bird. Then the horses bolted the stable. There's no sense in trying to close the stable. So you determine your future by what you do with your babies. So we have a breeding program, a youngster weaning program, a pre-race program, a racing program, and a molting program. Basically those 5 programs. And they're on the AVIO Med website. And in time we will definitely, the association with Avian Biotech is short and it hasn't been long, but we will develop those equivalent type of programs as well. So yes, I'm a big proponent of preventative treatment, but being very cognizant of the fact that you don't want to treat each and every disease. There's no sense in treating muscle and wing disease preventatively, because that streptococcus will always be there. You need the insurance policy of having the right medicine there, so when the pigeon develops muscle and wing, you treat it. Okay, so we treat only the preventative treatment protocols that we feel make sense. And then hugely importantly, you augment that treatment program with a preventative nutraceutical program, which will strengthen the immune system. And emphatically, if anybody ever tells you that you need to treat your pigeons during the molt period, please just tell him that there's one vet that said that's the biggest hogwash in the world. You won't find a single medicine in my molting treatment management program. It's all to do with stimulating the molt, allowing the birds to slow down, allowing that molt to form, because that's the second thing. If you don't have a good molt, then you also lost for that year. Okay, so it's a very intricate thing in finding the right program for the birds. So yes, it's available in AVIO-Med. Okay. And it will be in Avian Biotech as well. Then the question of the expiration dates. Okay, many medicines are still effective post their expiration date. It again depends on the quality and the reputability of the company making the medicines. And I'm not saying companies are putting incorrect expiration dates, but we are allowed in manufacture, the active ingredient will actually have a 5-year expiry date. Okay, and once you've made up that used that active ingredient in your product, then you have a 2 to 2.5 year expiration date on it. So it depends how old the active ingredient was. You can mix an active ingredient right at the end of that 5 years and then say that it's already expired, but you can then give it another 2.5 years expiration. So yes, some products can be used after the expiration date, and if it's been thoroughly and correctly stored in dry, cool places, there are very few products that will become toxic after the expiration date. Okay, so that's the short, long answer. Okay. Yes, sir.
One came up. When medicating in young bird racing, do we still feed grit to pigeons?
Okay, yeah, another really good question. I think the grit scenario came, and that question is asked again and again and again. I only know of one product or one antibiotic that you should keep the grit away completely. Okay, and it's really important that we distinguish between two of these one group. So the oxytetracycline and chlortetracycline products, terramycin and aureomycin, there was the old trade names, they severely hamper the absorption of doxycycline, of oxytetracycline and chlortetracycline. Okay, in opposition to that, doxycycline is not affected. So people ask me, do we have to take the grit away when you're giving doxycycline? Definitely not. I would say at the very most you can take the grit away for 2 days or 3 days a week, but you don't want to take it away for that long period of time. And then there may be here and there some other products as well, but But generally speaking, you can keep it except if you're using oxytetracycline and chlortetracycline. Okay. Thank you.
I think this is somewhat related to the grit question, but we just had a conversation on the way over here. We have well water in our home and using products like doxycycline.
Yes.
With well water versus, and we don't have chlorinated water.
Yes.
So that's not an issue. But
Yeah. No, it is. In doxycycline, that really is an issue. Although you can get dark doxycycline that is already color changed, that is still effective. So we've proven emphatically that if it changes color from the normal purplish yellow color to the black color, as long as you don't keep it in the water for more than 12 to 18 hours, it's still fine. Only then but that's an indication that it's going to start breaking down and oxidizing. There is research that was done with a PhD from somebody in South Africa, actually a lady that did a PhD, which proved that if you add a certain thing, and we're going to start adding doxycycline into our doxycycline formulations that we formulate, that slows this whole progression down. But certainly the answer is much rather medicate with a well water that has been well tested against your pathogens, okay? And that's not heavy in iron, and so where your mineral composition is still fine. A good well water is definitely better than what we're getting in South Africa. I can't talk for America. Many cities in America has really high quality water, but that's not the case in South Africa, okay? Does that answer that? Yeah. Okay. Anything?
That water question.
Yes.
Softened water.
Yeah. The way I understand softened water is actually the chlorine, if I'm correct.
Takes out the calcium, magnesium.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, okay. So filtered water, basically softened water and the filtered water, yes. No, so again, definitely that, in my mind, long-term usage of softened water where the minerals have been taken out is certainly not the way to go, because water adds substantially to our grains. Are generally speaking, especially the higher volume grains that we get, the GMO type grains that are not grown on a farm out somewhere in the sticks, which just grows for themselves and well fertilized and everything like that with natural fertilizers. So yes, softened water is not the ideal, definitely, because you need to actually have that trace elements and fluorine and things in the water. Okay. Very good question and comment. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Question online. Do you recommend vaccines as a preventive against diseases, or in cases when you have a disease displayed, like you explained, paratyphoid?
Okay. Yeah. Emphatically, yes, definitely. So vaccines play a major role. As a general rule, I absolutely advise the use of inactivated vaccines. In other words, you kill you grow the virus, you multiply the virus, you harvest the virus, you then kill it very effectively, and you must be sure that you kill it completely inactivated. You add what we call an adjuvant, so it basically gets absorbed and it actually is mixed with this adjuvant. What that does, it releases that virus slowly, the cells of the virus and part of the DNA slowly in the bloodstream, and gives the pigeon a chance to slowly develop the immunity. So an inactivated vaccine will take a period of time, but it'll give you good and lasting immunity. So yes, if it's a high quality vaccine, if it's been inactivated correctly, if it's got the right adjuvant in, it's a fantastic and a mandatory thing to clear up some diseases. And the Pakistani strain of the vaccine that we've developed in South Africa is a telling sort of justice to that. The live vaccines, generally speaking, have very short period of immunity, specifically the Lesotho vaccine for paramyxovirus, the Newcastle vaccine. You get a short immunity. You've got to put it in the eye every month to have any lasting sort of immunity, but that has a place as an immune stimulant. So once the pigeon has been effectively vaccinated against paramyxovirus, and you then add the Lesotho, it will give an immune boosting effect, and we will sometimes find racing performance and vigor, etc., actually increasing for a short period of time. So generally speaking, yes, you've got a vaccinate correct vaccines. And I'm a little bit hesitant about the current 4-in-1, 5-in-1 vaccines, which has got circovirus, a coronavirus, rotavirus, and paramyxovirus. It took many, many years of actually getting that done in dogs and cats, and it's only now in the last few decades that it's been effective. So I'm not that sure that it's a good thing. If you have a major problem with that disease, it's worthwhile doing that. But I still prefer vaccinating specifically for paramyxovirus or paratyphoid, and those not together then.
Where do you recommend you give shots? The leg, the skin?
It's these inactivated vaccines are all subcutaneously, so they've got to go under the skin, and that's hugely important. Okay, so if you inject the vaccine into the skin, and you can't believe that you can actually do that, but the skin of a pigeon, and especially the area just below the skin, there's some cells and some pieces of connective tissue. If you inject it in there, you'll get these horrible yellow caseous knobs, it looks like cheese that comes off. And that's not poor vaccine, that's incorrect vaccination. So I personally just find that the best way is at the base of the neck, and I also think it's really difficult for anybody to do it alone. So you've got to have a good head holder and a good pigeon holder, and your pigeon holder will basically, the head holder will pull it forward. You'll go right at the base of the neck in the middle, because again, on the sides of the pigeon's neck, you have really big blood vessels, and if you inject the oil into those blood vessels, it does happen. In very rare, but it happens, and it'll normally happen with your combine winner, that he'll just fall dead immediately after you've done it. Okay, so in the neck, many people use the groin area, but the skin's fairly well attached in that area, and it's much easier to get into the muscle there and actually cause a granuloma. So I prefer the neck, but it's always subcutaneous. Okay.
One question here about vaccination.
Yes.
How do you feel about vaccinating young birds in the nest at 21 years old?
Okay.
21 days old.
So, okay, another really, really good question. Now, if you asked me that question 5, 6, 7 years ago, before my visit to Morocco, I would have said to you, birds, it's a little bit early. So, thanks so much. 2 answers to this question. Number 1, what is the vaccine status of the breeding birds? Okay, just 1 second. We have to remember that as cows and foals and human beings get their immune system, their immunity from what we call colostrum, which is the first milk, pigeons get their immunity from the crop milk. So for the first 2 days, that pigeons don't feed grain. First 2 to 3 days, they feed the crop milk. So number 1, the yolk that is actually incorporated into the baby when he's born, that carries some antibodies, okay? And number 2, that is then perpetuated by what they feed the pigeon, the baby pigeon, from day 1 to day 3 or 5. If you have inadequately vaccinated parent birds, breeding birds, they will not transfer enough immunity to last that baby. Okay. Now we've found that immunity, and I'm talking specifically paramyxo now, immunity starts even in pigeons that have been well injected in the breeding stock, will start waning from 14 days. Okay, and at 28 days, many of those pigeons with high quality vaccines like Novulus P201, which is a really great inactivated vaccine, will at 28 days the pigeon will become susceptible to paramyxo again. Okay, so what I'm saying is we know now that the dead vaccine, because it's released so slowly, does not eat up the immunity of the pigeons. So I'm now advising that, especially if the Pakistani strain is around, or if there's a big problem with paramyxo, that you vaccinate from 14 to 21 days the first time. So 14-day vaccination is effective if the disease is there, and in spite of the fact that you vaccinated effectively. If you haven't vaccinated, I would emphatically always vaccinate at 14 days, okay? And then hugely importantly, it is to actually wean that baby, preferably if you're going to be raising that bird. And in some degrees, I think that the show pigeon the same holds. You wean that baby into a weaning loft. Okay, the biggest single mistake that we make as pigeon fanciers is we have these wonderful babies. We vaccinated them correctly. 21 to 26 days, 28 days, you wean them. Now you take that pigeon and you throw him into the young bird loft, or in some cases even into the adult bird loft, into your racing loft, okay? And that pigeon is already hugely stressed just by his weaning action, by the weaning action, and being separated from his parents and everything. Now you're putting him with other pigeons, especially if they're youngsters, which are then excreting the viruses in many cases, and you make him, then he gets that disease. So I strongly recommend that you, in all cases, get a weaning loft, even if it's a small little loft, and the babies go first in, first out. Okay, so you put them in there for 2 weeks, and you clean them up with your young bird treatment program, and then your second vaccine is done while they're in that weaning loft. And only after the 2 weeks they then go into the young bird loft, because then they've really got a good immunity and all of the stress of weaning has actually been out of them. They don't have to actually compete so hard with a youngster. It's like putting a toddler into a sophomore year's class. You know, it just doesn't work. Okay. Anything more from the floor?
Same guy, same question. At 14 days, what dosage? Are we still vaccinating the same dosage as the adults?
Okay. Again, really great question. Bottom line is vaccines are developed according to the amount of virus you give, not according to the size of the animal. Okay, so when you have a puppy, and the best way to answer that question is if you've got a 200-gram Chihuahua puppy, or whether you have a 10-kilogram Newfoundland or a Great Dane puppy, they get the same volume of vaccine. So it's the recommended volume for the pigeon. Okay, so if it's 0.25 milliliters, even if he's 14 days old, he's going to get 2.25 milliliters. Whether he's a racing homer or he's a king, which is weighing double the weight, it's not weight and body, it's species specific. Okay. Is that it? Can we wrap it down? Okay, well then I just want to spend the time or have the opportunity to thank again Dennis. Thank you, my friend. It's been absolutely wonderful. To thank the audience. You've been a fantastic audience. To thank everybody that streamed. To thank you, Tony, that's done the streaming for us. I hope this video or the stream goes thick and wide and far. My email address we will place on there with pleasure, or the email address for AVIO Med, where they can send more questions and things to. You can absolutely get into contact with you as well. Dennis will place Dennis's email address on there as well, and we'll take it from there. And let's hope this is not the last one that we'll be doing in America. Okay, and it's been an absolute pleasure being here. And I have incredibly good news, but unfortunately I can't share it with you. Maybe when I'm allowed to, I'll share it on the podcast. Okay, so thank you so much.